They chained the fat girl outside Mountain Man's cabin as a gift. He broke the chains and burned the town. "Who chains a woman to my porch?" Cain Blackthorn's voice rolled out of the trees like thunder, and for a heartbeat the mountain went still. It was near midnight in the high country above Devil's Crossing, the moon a white coin snagged in black spruce. Frost filmed the railings. The cabin window burned a small square of lamplight against the dark, and there, on the front post, iron bit into flesh. Iris Blackwell's wrists were blue beneath the shackles, her dress torn where rough hands had dragged her, her breath coming in quick white ghosts. The note tacked above her head fluttered in the night wind as if trying to escape its own words. A gift for the beast in joy. Back in town, Mad Dog Murphy and his pack would be howling at their own cleverness to leave a saloon girl bound like bait where the old bounty hunter slept. Devil's Crossing had learned to live under the boot heel, to laugh when told and look away when blood hit the boardwalk. The blacksmith shop where Iris's father died still smelled of cinders and lies. The sheriff counted his wages in fear. The saloon poured the rotgut that kept the wolves fed. And the wolves had decided Iris was a joke worth telling. Cain set down the deer he carried. Lamplight caught the map of scars across his knuckles as he reached for the chain. The links creaked. Iris flinched. "Don't hurt me," she whispered. "Please, I didn't choose this." "I know," he said. Steel met steel. The bar broke on the second blow. The chain fell like a dead snake into the frost. In a town that mistook cruelty for law, one man had just chosen a side. And you, wherever you are, city window, farmhouse, kitchen, night bus rattling toward morning, would you have cut the chains too? Before that night on the mountain, Iris Blackwell had already learned how to disappear. She wasn't born weak, she was born visible. Her father used to say she looked like spring after a hard winter, round, soft, with laughter that filled a room. But in Devil's Crossing, men didn't value warmth unless they could own it. After her father's forge burned the night the Murphy gang accidentally set fire to it while collecting protection money, Iris had no one left. She cleaned tables at the Red Lantern Saloon, the same place that sold the whiskey funding her father's death. Every night, she served men who made her skin crawl, men who grinned when she walked past, who whispered jokes about her weight, who dropped coins on the floor just to make her bend. She needed the money for food, so she smiled and pretended not to hear. But the truth was, Iris heard everything, every word, every laugh, every promise that she was nothing more than the fat girl who poured drinks. Mad Dog Murphy was the worst of them, broad-shouldered, cruel, with eyes like mud after rain. He ruled the town through fear, backed by his drunk brothers and the sheriff who owed him gold. To him, Iris was an easy target. When she refused his advances one night, he slapped her across the face in front of the whole saloon. No one moved. No one helped. That humiliation should have ended there, but it didn't. The next night, Murphy came back with a plan, a gift, he called it, for the beast of Blackthorn Ridge, the reclusive hunter everyone feared. The men laughed as they dragged Iris through the mud, her cries muffled by the snow. They said Cain Blackthorn lived so wild he'd forgotten what mercy was, that he might take her as company or prey, and either way it would be worth watching from afar. When they chained her to his porch, the night swallowed their laughter, but the echo stayed. Iris tried to pray, but her words froze in her throat. Her wrists bled. Her dress stiffened with frost. And still she whispered to the dark, "Papa, if you can hear me, please don't let him be a monster." That's when she saw him, Cain Blackthorn, stepping out of the trees like something carved from the mountain itself. Tall, broad, wrapped in a wolf-skin coat, his face half hidden by shadow, half by scars. But it was his eyes that silenced her scream, not cruel, not mad, just tired. When he broke her chains, something inside her broke too, the part that believed no one would ever choose to be kind to her again. That was the night the beast turned protector. Cain Blackthorn had long ago traded civilization for silence. Once he'd been a bounty hunter, the best this side of the Rockies, a man who tracked killers through snowstorms and deserts, who brought justice at the end of a smoking gun. But justice had a price, and eventually Cain learned that in Devil's Crossing it was always paid in blood. He'd quit the life after a job gone wrong, a job that left a woman and child dead, and his name whispered as a curse. Now he lived alone on the ridge, building his own peace plank by plank. The forest was his ally, the wolves his neighbors, the wind his only judge. He hunted only what he needed, spoke to no one, and kept the past buried where snow never melted, until Iris Blackwell appeared chained like a warning, shivering like a ghost. That night, after breaking her shackles, Cain carried her inside. His cabin was rough but clean, walls lined with cured hides, a stone hearth glowing with steady fire, and a heavy oak table scarred from years of use. He set her near the fire, poured water into a tin cup, and said, "Drink." His voice was deep gravel and warmth mixed together. She obeyed, her hands trembling. Why did you help me?" Cain looked into the flames. "Because I've seen chains before, and I remember what they sound like." Iris studied him, the scars along his jaw, the way his hands moved with quiet control. This wasn't a man who sought violence. This was a man who'd survived it. When she tried to thank him, he shook his head. "Don't. Eat instead." He handed her a bowl of stew, thick, fragrant, the first real meal she'd had in days. The firelight softened his features. For the first time, Iris noticed something beneath the roughness, a trace of gentleness that didn't match his fearsome legend. As she ate, Cain sat across from her, silent, his eyes distant, as though every flicker of the fire reminded him of something he'd lost long ago. Later, when she tried to stand, her legs gave out. Without a word, Cain caught her before she fell. His hands were calloused but careful, holding her as if she were something fragile. "You'll stay here tonight," he said. "You'll be safe. But the townspeople say you're dangerous." Cain almost smiled, a shadow of humor passing across his face. "Then it's a good thing you're not one of them." He laid out a blanket near the fire for himself and gave her his bed. Before blowing out the lantern, he added quietly, "Sleep? No one will hurt you here." And as the storm moved over the ridge, Iris lay awake, listening to the steady sound of his breathing. For the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid. Somewhere deep inside, the mountain man who had once sworn never to care for anyone again began to wonder if maybe this time he was meant to save someone instead of destroy. The storm lingered for 3 days. Snow swallowed the ridge, turning the world outside Cain's cabin into a blur of white silence. Inside, warmth glowed from the fire, a fragile pocket of life in the heart of winter. Iris stayed mostly near the hearth, wrapped in a wool blanket far too large for her, while Cain worked around the cabin chopping wood, mending tools, and checking traps between flurries. At first, she watched him in wary quiet, unsure of her place. But Cain treated her as though she belonged there, as though her being present didn't disturb the balance of his solitude. He'd leave food by her side, a bowl of rabbit stew, fresh bread, wild tea, and always mutter the same words. Eat. You need strength. When she tried to thank him, he'd grunt something that might have been acknowledgment or embarrassment. By the second night, Iris began to move more freely. She swept the floor, washed dishes, and fed his old hound, Ash. Cain didn't stop her, but when she nearly slipped carrying a bucket of water, he caught her arm. His voice came out softer than she'd ever heard it. You don't have to earn your place here, Iris. The way he said her name, careful, respectful, made her chest tighten. No one in Devil's Crossing had said it kindly in years. When the snow finally eased, Cain took her outside. The air was sharp, glittering, pines bent under the weight of white. You should see what safety looks like, he said, handing her his coat. From the ridge, the valley below stretched endless, the town a distant smudge of smoke. This, Cain murmured, is the only place they can't reach. For a long time, they stood in silence, watching the sunlight break over the peaks. Then, without turning to her, he asked, Do you ever plan to go back? Iris hesitated. There's nothing there for me, no one. Cain nodded once. Then stay, until you decide otherwise. Her breath caught. You want me to stay? I want you safe, he said simply. That's all. But it wasn't all. Days turned into weeks, and the cabin found a rhythm. Iris mended torn shirts with clumsy stitches. Cain taught her to split logs and light the stove. They shared quiet dinners, where silence wasn't empty, it was peace. One evening, she pricked her finger sewing and hissed in pain. Cain crossed the room instantly, kneeling beside her. He took her hand, large, scarred, warm, and pressed a cloth to the small wound. It's nothing, she whispered, embarrassed. He looked at her, eyes steady. Doesn't have to be something for me to care. Her throat tightened. Why are you so kind to me? Cain hesitated, then said, Because someone should have been. That night, while the fire crackled low, they sat together without words. The only sound was the wind humming softly through the pines. Iris leaned her head against the back of the chair, half asleep, her face glowing in the firelight. Cain looked at her for a long time, at the peace he'd thought he'd never see again, the forgiveness he hadn't known he needed. He whispered, more to himself than to her, You're not a gift, Iris. You're a reminder that not everything in this world is meant to be broken. And for the first time since the night she was chained, Iris smiled not out of gratitude, but out of belonging. Spring crept slowly across the ridge. Snow melted into streams that sang down the mountainside, and the first wildflowers broke through the frost. Inside the cabin, Iris and Cain had built something unspoken, a rhythm between two wounded souls. But peace never lasted long in the world below. One morning, Cain returned from town with a grim look carved into his face. He dropped a burlap sack of supplies onto the table and said quietly, They know you're alive. Iris froze, her hands tightening around a mug of tea. Who? Murphy's gang, the ones who left you here. She went pale. But I thought you... I burned the saloon they drank in, but rats don't all die in one fire. He met her eyes. They're regrouping. Murphy's brother is calling himself the new leader, and they've got a new target. Her breath caught. You? Cain shook his head slowly. You. They want you back. They want to finish what they started. That night, Iris couldn't sleep. She stared into the dying fire, her mind replaying every scream, every laugh from that night she'd been dragged up the mountain. The fear returned like smoke under her skin. Cain sat across from her, sharpening a knife, his expression unreadable. "If they come," he said, "we'll be ready." Iris swallowed. "You can't fight them alone." "I'm not alone anymore." The words silenced her. The next day, Iris found him outside, splitting logs with fierce precision. She gathered her courage and said, "I need to tell you something." He lowered the axe. "I found something in my father's forge before it burned. A map to a silver vein in those hills near the old riverbed. He said he wanted to use it to make a new life for us." Her voice shook. "That's why they killed him. Murphy wanted it. They think I still have it." Cain's eyes hardened. "Do you?" She nodded slowly. "It's in the lining of my dress. I didn't even remember until after you found me." Cain exhaled through his nose, steadying himself. "Then they're not just coming for revenge. They're coming for fortune." That evening, the wind shifted a strange stillness before the storm. Cain stood at the cabin window, watching clouds crawl over the valley. He said quietly, "You don't have to be afraid anymore. If they come, I'll end it." But Iris stepped beside him, her hand finding his arm. "I won't hide this time." He turned to her, eyes searching. "You don't have to fight." She met his gaze without trembling. "I have to live. That means standing beside the man who gave me back my life." For a long moment, they just stood there, the ex-bounty hunter who'd sworn off blood, and the woman who had every reason to fear it until the storm broke above them, thunder rolling like a warning. Cain loaded his rifle. Iris lit the lantern. Together they waited, because some chains were made of iron, but others of memory, and both were about to be tested by fire. The storm came before dawn. Thunder cracked across the ridge, and the wind carried something darker than rain, the smell of smoke and gunpowder. Cain stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, eyes narrowing as he saw the faint orange glow crawling up from the valley. "They're coming," he murmured. Behind him, Iris appeared in the doorway, clutching the lantern. "How many?" "Too many," he said, sliding bullets into the chamber. "But enough." She took a step closer. "Let me help." He turned toward her, his face lit by a flash of lightning. "I won't have you in the line of fire." "I was in chains once," she said quietly, "and I'm not standing behind walls again." Cain stared at her for a long moment, then handed her the second rifle leaning by the door. "You shoot only if they break through the line. Aim for their horses, not their hearts. Mercy is still ours to choose." The first shot came from the tree line. Cain fired back before the echo faded. Shadows broke through the mist. Murphy's men riding up the slope like specters, torches hissing in the rain. Cain moved with precision, his body remembering the rhythm of violence he'd sworn to forget. One man fell. Another's horse bolted into the dark. Each pull of the trigger was cold, calculated not rage, not revenge, just justice. Inside the cabin, Iris knelt by the window, her hand steady despite the pounding of her heart. She saw one of the men trying to flank the porch and fired. The recoil nearly threw her back, but the shot found its mark. Cain turned at the sound, saw the man drop, and felt something fierce and proud rise in his chest. When the last of the gang stumbled from the trees, Murphy's brother was among them, big, red-bearded, grinning through blood and mud. "You can't stop what's coming, Blackthorn," he shouted. "This town belongs to us." Kane stepped out into the rain, unarmed now, his rifle slung behind him. "Then come take it." The man lunged, swinging a hatchet. Kane caught his wrist, twisted, and drove a fist into his gut. The man dropped to his knees. "This is for her father," Kane said, voice low. He struck once more, ending it clean. When it was over, the rain washed the blood away. Smoke drifted upward, carrying with it the last breath of the gang that had haunted Devil's Crossing for years. Iris stepped outside, soaked and trembling. Kane turned to her, rain dripping from his hair, his hand still shaking from the fight. "It's done," he said softly. "It's over." She shook her head, tears mixing with the rain. "No, it's begun." Kane frowned. "What do you mean?" "You can't stay up here forever," she said. "They'll send others, the sheriff, the traders, whoever wants that silver. You didn't just fight for me, Kane. You fought for the whole town. They need to know what kind of man you really are." He looked toward the valley, where the fires burned low. "They called me a beast." "Then let them see what the beast protects," she whispered. That night, Kane rode down to Devil's Crossing with Iris behind him on the saddle. The streets were silent, the saloon nothing but ash and char. The townsfolk gathered in doorways, staring at the pair who emerged from the smoke. Kane dismounted and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Your chains are gone. The Murphy gang won't come back. But if you let men like them rise again, I'll be the one knocking next time." Then he turned his horse toward the mountains. Iris hesitated, looking at the town that had once watched her humiliation without a word. And then, with quiet dignity, she said, "You don't have to be cruel to be strong." And together they rode away the mountain, reclaiming what it had once lent to justice. Weeks passed before the valley stopped whispering Kane Blackthorn's name. The smoke had long cleared from Devil's Crossing, but people still talked of the night the mountain came alive, of gunfire rolling like thunder, and of the man they once called the Beast, who had saved them all. Kane and Iris never went back. They didn't need to. Their world existed higher, quieter, cleaner, where the air carried the scent of pine and promise. Spring deepened. The snow melted from the ridge, revealing rivers of wild flowers and clear streams. Iris had begun tending a small garden behind the cabin, herbs, potatoes, a few stubborn sunflowers that fought the wind and won. Kane built her a wooden fence around it, though she teased him that the deer were too smart to be stopped by planks. "They'll learn," he said, "or I'll teach them." She laughed, a sound that had once been rare and fragile, but now filled the air like bird song. At night they sat together on the porch, watching the stars bloom over the mountains. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't need to. One evening, Iris turned to him, the firelight soft against her cheeks. "Do you ever wish things had been different?" Kane's hands rested on his knees. "Different how?" "That I hadn't been left on your porch in chains. That you hadn't had to save me." He shook his head slowly. "If it hadn't happened, you'd still be there, and I'd still be half dead up here." She looked down. "You weren't dead." He smiled faintly. "I was close enough." Later that night, while Kane mended a broken chair by lamplight, Iris placed something on the table, a folded scrap of parchment, the one she had hidden all this time. "The map?" Kane asked. She nodded. "The silver vein my father found. It's real. We could sell it, buy land down in the valley, start again." Kane studied the paper for a long time. then folded it back. This ridge gave us everything we needed. It doesn't owe us more. She reached for his hand. Then we stay. He covered her fingers with his, rough palms gentler than any words. We stay. That summer, the mountain bloomed wild and full. The cabin walls were lined with laughter instead of silence. Cain carved her a ring from river oak, saying he had no use for gold. She wore it proudly, because what she wanted wasn't wealth, it was belonging. Sometimes, when the wind carried faint echoes from the town below, Iris would ask softly, "Do you think they remember us?" Cain would pull her closer, his voice low. "Doesn't matter. We remember each other." And in that truth, there was peace the kind forged not by mercy or miracle, but by two broken souls who refused to stay broken. The mountain had seen violence, chains, and fire. Now it saw light, and the smoke that rose from Cain Blackthorn's chimney no longer meant destruction. It meant home. They used to call him the Beast of Blackthorn Ridge. Now, when travelers pass through Devil's Crossing and look up at the mountain, they just see smoke curling from a chimney, steady, calm, alive. They say that's where the beast learned to be human again, and where a girl once chained to a porch found her wings. Iris Blackwell was never the joke they made of her. She was the proof that kindness can rise from cruelty, that fire can forge strength instead of scars. And Cain Blackthorn, the man who once swore he'd never care again, discovered that even the hardest hearts can still remember how to protect, how to love, how to build something gentle. The night he broke her chains, the story changed not just theirs, but the whole town's, because people began to believe again that a woman's worth isn't the weight of her body or the silence of her suffering. That one act of courage can burn down years of fear. If you're still listening, remember this. Sometimes life will chain you to someone's cruelty, to shame, to grief, to the things you didn't deserve, but somewhere out there, there's always one person or one moment brave enough to break those chains. Maybe you've already met them, or maybe, like Iris, they'll find you when the night feels longest. So tell me, before you go, where are you listening from tonight? From a crowded city that's forgotten kindness, or a quiet room that still smells like rain? Because wherever you are, someone like Iris is still waiting to be seen, to be believed in, to be set free. And if you believe that kindness can still save a life, then don't scroll away. The next story might just be the one that finds you